What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with Astro DFS, bringing you a brand new video. Today's video, we are going over Week 11's cash and GPP plays. So, unfortunately, I won't have as much time as I usually do on Saturdays to make the separate GPP video, so I'm just going to combine them. So, let's get into it. So, for cash, I'm looking at the most expensive guy right now is Brock Purdy at 6,600. Just a high total game. Their team and applied total is really good. They're home. It's a division game. This game does have implications. So I really like Brock Purdy getting Christian McCaffrey back. Do believe we're going to get George Kittle in that game. Juwan Jennings, I believe, just got cleared, basically, so should be good to go based off of the practice notification. So Juwan Jennings should be good to go. So I really like Brock Purdy at 6,600. We go down a little more. Bo Nix at 6,200 at home against Atlanta. Kind of seen the fantasy points Bo Nix has put up this season. And more importantly, just, as of late, and that's being on the road in two tough games against Baltimore and Kansas City, and still pays off kind of for his price tag. Obviously, the last few weeks you haven't seen the rushing upside that we kind of got the glimpse of in New Orleans and LA. 36 against Baltimore is good, but they pretty much got steamrolled. Unfortunately for them, they lost to Kansas City in the way they did. Bo Nix still has a really, really solid game. No rushing for him in that one. This one facing a very inconsistent defense. You'll see a couple drives where they look really, really good. Majority of the time they don't. And they've had a pretty easy schedule, so I really like Bo Nix at home against them. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Russell Wilson at 5,900 at home against Baltimore. We know how intense these games are of Baltimore and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh hosting this one, so it does seem like Kyle Hamilton, last time I checked, good chance he's out. Would have to double check that before game, obviously, but that would be a huge blow to a secondary that is already really bad against the pass. Najee Harris cleared, so he'll be good to go. So Pittsburgh's going to have their full running force. Now, if they play a pretty good play action, if they decide to pass a little more, there are some opportunities, and Russ has just been solid, especially for his price points lately. So since becoming a starter, 24, 14, and 19, especially at his price point, 54, 59, 59, staying at that 59. So paid off definitely in 2 out of the 3 games. Still the game against the Giants. I mean, that was a primetime one, I do believe, if I'm not mistaken. If not, 14.8 is still not the worst scenario for 5,900. Geno Smith, I think, if DK is good to go, which it looks like he is, Geno at 5,700 is a really good play, right? We've kind of seen San Fran with Ward being out, that defense kind of being not the same they have in years past. So someone like Jadavius Ward, if he is still out, it's a huge blow for San Fran's secondary. But Geno Smith and this offense they're throwing the ball. They are kind of seeing it dump off the last few weeks. Unfortunately, with DK out, but you look in the beginning of the season with DK in, and the yards and pass attempts are there. So go back to week 6, puts up 17 DraftKings points. So at 5,700, that definitely pays off there. And this one they're on the road, so is still a tougher one. A division game down, more down the season, does have a lot more implications as you go down farther. So 5,700, just a really good play there in my opinion. And then we go down to 5,500, Jameis Winston on the road against New Orleans, to where we know New Orleans team is just in shambles. Maybe they try to come back, but it's the season's not over for them by any means. I think they're only 2 games out of the playoff, maybe three, I think, out of the playoffs. Could be fact checked on that, but it's not like the season's done. And then we have Jameis. He's going to throw the ball. He is going to throw the ball in 2 games against a Baltimore defense that very bad against the pass. 41 pass attempts, 300, 34 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then week 9 against the Chargers, still 46 pass attempts in that game. 3 interceptions and a fumble. So if you take the interceptions and fumble away, which is what, 6 points, I believe. I think picks are 2, right? So 6-7 points there. If they're 1, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank, but if they're 1, 4 points, 17 pays off there. So Jameson, a revenge game, I really like at 5,500 as well. So to go to tournament side of this, right, I do like the Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes exposure in that one. These guys have put out bangers every time they play. Even if it's a low-scoring one, it's still a really, really good game. So I definitely want exposure for both quarterbacks in that one, especially Patrick Mahomes at 6,800. I definitely want exposure with that. Going down, Jared Goff, definitely going to want some exposure there at home. I think what the highest team implied total, heavy favorites, no Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, the only concern of why Jared Goff isn't a locked cash play is how good Detroit has been on the run, with both David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. Laporta is out, but still that doesn't give me any reason to not play Jared Goff. It's just how good Detroit's run game can be and how good their defense can be would kind of turn you away from Jared Goff. So with that one there, Tua at 6K, I definitely think is playable at home against Vegas. I think he's just too cheap in this matchup, but for what he's put out fantasy-wise, I don't think he's cheap at all. Since returning 14, 17, and 10. And, I mean, you could say the defense is right against an Arizona defense. Like, should have had a better game, right? But Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert have great games there. And then you get a tough game against Buffalo, kind of almost the same thing. 89% completion percentage in that one. Goes up a little bit, 17 DraftKings points there. And against a Rams defense who just, I think, I thought they were bad, but no. Played really, really good there. 10 DraftKings points in that one. And that was a showdown. So now get to Vegas defense. I definitely think Tua at his price point is very playable. Depending on if you just don't want to play Achane or Mostert or Jalen Wright. I like Tua. I like Tyreek Hill. I like Juanu Smith in that one. So definitely exposure there. I will go down and mention Aaron Rodgers at 5,500. The Jets continue to disappoint me, but I think it is a good matchup against Indy. They are home. Anthony Richardson is the quarterback, so there is some potential for the Jets to have the ball quite a bit and Aaron Rodgers to do his thing. So I really like him and his price point, 5,500, averaging 14.9 DraftKings points a game. I mean, you go and look at the ups and downs, right? 5 last week, you saw 20 the week before, so definitely I think he's paid off pretty much a lot this season. Obviously, when he hits that 6K range, hasn't, but I mean, we're getting Aaron Rodgers at the lowest we've had him this season in a good home matchup. So, one exposure there. And then I'll go down Anthony Richardson, like the mobile quarterback potential is there, right? I think we all know that. It's a tough matchup on the road. And Joe Flacco's still there. It's not like Joe Flacco's injured. But I mean, you kind of see the rushing he's gotten this season. Like at 5,300, is it crazy to say like 16 or 17 points where he gets a rushing touchdown and 40 yards and just does the rest in the air? Like he doesn't even have to throw a passing touchdown, right? If he gets a rushing touchdown, which I mean you could see here, he's gotten one so far this season. But against the Jets, you get a rushing touchdown, you get 40 yards, that's 10 points there. You throw for, 150, that's another 6 points? That's 16 points right there. Definitely pays off there at his price point. So I don't think it's crazy to say Anthony Richardson at 5,300 can get you 16 points. So exposure definitely there as well. Other than that, I don't really have any quarterbacks that I'm looking at. I mean, you could throw out Derek Carr. I just don't really want to get there with how New Orleans receivers are right now. So Moving on to running backs for cash, Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara, the two most expensive running backs, are definitely cash plays for me. Christian McCaffrey, like, if you were to tell me that Christian McCaffrey was at any time, even coming back off of a major injury, below 9K, I would not believe you. He has been a 9, at least an 8,500 and above, usually above 9K running back. We're getting him at 8,300. Hey, they said we're only getting him, 20 opportunities. Guess what? He got all 20 opportunities. And although he didn't pay off for what you paid at 8K, still got you 16.7, which if you looked at how last week went, it's not bad, right? If you didn't play Bijan, you were praying for 16 points out of a running back. So I do think in a favorable matchup against Seattle, he's very playable. And Kamara, just the volume he gets. Look, I'm not the highest on Kamara for the rushing, but the receiving he gets is what makes him so playable. So 8,200, I think he's there for me in cash. I love Kyren Williams. Obviously, you go in. We look recently since getting Puka and cut back. We haven't seen the same Kyren Williams, but he's got a very, very, very favorable matchup against New England, who's been very bad against the run. I will keep saying it, very bad against the run. So I like Kyren Williams. Kind of at a discount at 7,900 in that matchup there. Going down, Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, both these guys kind of $100 off. I think both these guys are amazing cash plays. If I had to pick one, I'm picking Achane just because his snap share has been higher. I do think it's an amazing game for Gibbs at his price point. The worry with David Montgomery, either stealing some snaps or stealing the red zone work is there. It is a potential. And it is there for Achane as well with Raheem Mostert. But the receiving work Achane is since Tua is back, 8 targets, 5 targets. Like, he's getting a good amount of work just in the receiving game, right? We haven't seen him really explode on the ground yet. And he's got a very, very favorable matchup for running backs on the ground. So I definitely like both of these guys in this one. If you wanted some exposure to Seattle and you weren't sure of picking, DK, Lockett, JSN, Ken Walker's in a really good spot at 7K as a pass catching back, and he just gets almost all the volume there. So I definitely think he is there. I will say Kareem Hunt has got to be a cash play considerate based off of his price point. We like some of these top end running backs, but it's really hard to play two of these guys and then fit in a stud wide receiver. It's very hard on the slate to kind of do that. So if you're looking for a running back to kind of pay down, Kareem Hunt at 6,700 or David Montgomery at 65. I mentioned Gibbs. I think David Montgomery's just as good as Gibbs as far as the ceiling. Obviously, the receiving work and the athleticism of Jahmyr Gibbs is slightly better than David Montgomery. But David Montgomery is a very good, consistent, reliable running back. So if you wanted to go Kareem Hunt, David Montgomery to pay down, you could do that easily in this slate. And then I will say I'm not putting him as a cash play personally, but he will be owned. Audric estimate at 4,500. He will have ownership. It might not be the highest ownership, but I'd expect him to be a running back that gets ownership. I'm not putting him in my cash plays per se, but as far as where projected ownership is right now, he is there. So now going to the tournament side of it, I mentioned some of these top guys up here. Breece Hall has got to be mentioned. Jonathan Taylor in this one, to where both these teams need wins. They really, really need some wins here. Breece Hall, for the work he's gotten, has been good. The touchdowns have not been there for him. 4 touchdowns so far in the season, where we expected with the schedule the Jets have, Breece Hall to have a lot more touchdowns, a lot more opportunities, and definitely a lot more yards, right? If you look at it, just going off the DraftKings stats, only averaging 4.1 yards per carry, but you look at the receiving work he's gotten, 54 targets in 10 games, so almost 5.5 targets a game. And not to mention, still just averaging 4.1. Like, it's not bad, right? 2 rushing attempts. You got a 3rd and 2. So it's not the worst, but having no touchdowns has definitely hurt Breece Hall, which is why he's not a cash play this week. But the upside is always there for the talent that is Breece Hall. And Jonathan Taylor kind of getting Anthony Richardson back instead of Joe Flacco kind of seems like, wanting to rely more upon Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, last week with Joe Flacco in, still gets 21 rushing attempts against a very bad run defense, 17.2 DraftKings points on him. But just going back to earlier, I've seen some of the games with Anthony Richardson and just a little more consistency. So I do like Jonathan Taylor with Anthony Richardson being in. Josh Jacobs at 7,100 against the Bears. That's been a weakness for the Bears. That's been, something Green Bay has succeeded in is Josh Jacobs running the football. For the most part, been a pretty consistent running back. But against this Bears team, especially if my Bears offense can't get it clicking, Josh Jacobs and the Green Bay Packers offense is going to be on the field quite a bit, which means Josh Jacobs is going to get quite a bit of work. So that one is definitely worth mentioning. Nick Chubb at 6K. At 6K against New Orleans is playable, right? If you don't want to go the Jameis route or the Cedric Tillman route, and you still want some exposure, Nick Chubb at 6K, I think is in a pretty good spot. You just look at the opportunities he's gotten since returning from injury. 11 carries, 16 carries, 15 carries. You look at the opponents, right? Week 7 against Cincinnati in his first game back. Right, gets a touchdown, but doesn't look good. He's played 2 really good run defenses in Baltimore and the Chargers, so has a very favorable matchup for him in this one. So at 6K, definitely want some exposure to Nick Chubb in that one. Raheem Mostert at 5,800. Now his snaps have gone down quite a bit, right? I think it was 9 snaps last week, but it's a favorable matchup. They're heavy favorites at home. I'm going to have to mention Raheem Mostert just with how Miami's able to move the ball down the field. It's just not, kind of execute once they get down towards their opponent's side of the field. But if they get in the red zone, there's a big possibility we see a game like we saw to Raheem Mostert a few weeks ago where 9 rush attempts, 19 yards, but guess what? He got 2 touchdowns, so he paid off for his price point at 5,900. Now at 5,800 in a really good matchup as well. So we'll mention him down there. Moving on to wide receivers now. Amon-Ra, I think, has got to be a tournament play just because of Detroit's just so good at the run. If you want to put Amon-Ra in your cash, you can. I just think I'd rather go running back in that one, but I'm not excluding him from my cash pool. But I would more have him as a tournament. If I'm paying up for a wide receiver on this slate, I'm kind of looking at Puka Nacua at 7,300 just because of the volume he gets for the price point, right? Like 67, 72, 72 only goes up 100. You tell me a wide receiver gets 14 targets, 9 receptions, and 98 yards, only goes up 100 in a favorable matchup? I'm okay with that. I'm definitely okay with that. George Pickens at 7K. I mentioned earlier that I think it's a great matchup for George Pickens. I like George Pickens. I don't like his price point at 7K. I do not like it. You can go and look at the numbers since having Russ. 25, 11, 22 games above 20 DraftKings points. He's gotten 2 touchdowns in those games, right? Take the touchdown away, 19. Take the touchdown away, 14. You go and look early in the season with Justin Fields, like the numbers are there. But against a Baltimore defense, which is terrible against the pass, he's their number 1 guy. I'm not taking anything away from George Pickens. I love George Pickens. But his price point is ridiculous, right? Week 7 against the Jets, 5,800 explodes, right? Price goes up 500. 11 points against the Giants. Not really that good, right? Especially for 6,300. Not good. And then week 10 against Washington, he goes up 500 against Washington. He's 6,800, 20 points. pays off, right? Now he's 7K. The expectation that George Pickens needs to have, right? If you're paying 7K, you're hoping you cash because you're basically excluding a running back if you're going George Pickens. How many games has he had over 21 DraftKings points so far this season? One. He's had one game. I get it's a favorable matchup, but you have to be cautious with his price point. If he gets you 18 points, it's not the end of the world. But, I mean, there's a lot more better plays that we'll talk about here shortly at wide receiver for cheaper. That 18 points might not pay off for you if you're not paying for a, one or two top running backs on the slate. Deebo Samuel, I will mention for cash, in my opinion. Granted, since lately we haven't seen Deebo been Deebo to start the season. It kind of seemed like that. But I think he's a guy that's going to get consistent volume, right? Gets 7 targets, but gets 4 rushing attempts. Gets 6 targets, gets 3 rushing attempts. So Deebo is going to get volume. I just think the game has to be there for him. Seattle is one of those games, right? We go back and we look week 6 against Seattle. Only 5 targets, but he got 3 receptions for 102 yards at 76-yard touchdown. Was amazing. But 4 rushing attempts for 15 yards. So Deebo gets volume. Good matchup for Deebo. It's a more high-end cash pick than I want to play, but he is there for cash. Khalil Shakir, 6,300. Been my guy all season. Been enjoying playing him. Against Kansas City with no Keon Coleman. Amari Cooper questionable. Dalton Kincaid out. Yeah, Khalil Shakir kind of stands out to me at 6,300 as an obvious cash play. If Amari Cooper's out, it's, kind of a play that you put in again. If he gets you 11, 12 points, guess what? He's going to have such high ownership. Doesn't really matter. So I definitely think he is a cash play again. And it's just that much more better if Cooper is out for his sake. Not for Buffalo's sake, for his sake. Going down, I will say Courtland Sutton at 5,900 against Atlanta. If you're wanting to stack somebody with Bo Nix, Courtland Sutton, kind of look at where he's been lately, right? Out of the last 5 games he's played, 15. 21 against Carolina, 26 against Baltimore, 19 against Kansas City. So had some favorable opponents. Guess what? This one's also favorable. So at his price point, it's a very cheap stack with Bo Nix still. I definitely want exposure there. Continue to go down. This is kind of where we get the value at cash. Juwan Jennings at 5,300 at home against Seattle. Kind of look at Juwan Jennings. He gets there, right? Week 6 against Seattle, gets banged up, but 5 targets still on that one for the time he did play. But last week, his first game back with, CMC also being back, 16 DraftKings points in that one. So definitely love Juwan Jennings in this, especially first price point 53. It's under that average player price, which is what you want. The same price point though is Cedric Tillman at 5,300. Kind of just been on a tear. 12 targets, 9 targets, 11 targets. Another good matchup. Jameis is a quarterback, so he's got to be worth mentioning in cash. Other than that, for cash, there's no one else really, in my opinion. We could go down. You look at Kayshon Boutte at 3,500. You could say is a cash play. I have him as more of a tournament, but if you need to pay down, go ahead. He's gotten 6 targets in the last 3 games, so he's there. Curtis Samuel, you could say if Amari Cooper's out. And then I missed Calvin Austin here at 3,600. Kind of the same thing. Seen some more consistent targets with Russ. So those guys are for cash. For tournaments, I mentioned Amon-Ra. I think Justin Jefferson, kind of where he got his big game against Tennessee a few years ago. I think it's a good matchup for him. One of the best wide receivers versus man and zone. So doesn't matter the matchup there. Tyreek Hill, just because of what he's done this season, going to have lower ownership. I think it's a very favorable matchup for someone like Tyreek Hill. So at 7,400, I definitely think it's a good tournament play. Both Jets wide receivers, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams. Yet again, just amazing plays, just inconsistency in the offense, which makes them tournament plays. Zay Flowers is in a good spot at 6,900 as a good tournament play for me. Keep going down. DK Metcalf is in a really good spot at 6,500, same price as JSN. So, in my opinion, got leverage for DK Metcalf. Kind of see where he's been at. The week 6 against Seattle, 11 targets. Only got 3 catches in that game, but 11 targets against San Fran. And his price point was $7K. Now his price point goes down to $6,500. So DK Metcalf kind of in that player pool for me. Continuing going down, Calvin Ridley at home against Minnesota. Kind of good against man coverage, so like that opportunity there. I will mention Brian Thomas, although 3 targets with Mac Jones. 3. Trust me, if he had, a really good quarterback, Brian Thomas would be on a tear this season. Unfortunately, there's been some inconsistency on the very bad part. He's not there. But the upside for someone like Brian Thomas is there in the matchup against Detroit. Detroit's secondary has been pretty piss poor. They have their moments. They definitely have their moments. And when they're hot on that secondary. So it's unfortunate Brian Thomas has Mac Jones throwing to him because I do think he's an amazing play this week. Continuing to go down, I kind of like DJ Moore at 6K. I kind of really do against Green Bay, especially the McKinney trash talk. DJ Moore, just a tournament play for me. I definitely want to get exposure with kind of the back and forth that just happened. Jameson Williams at 5,800 is got to be a tournament play. I mean, his boom games and the boom opportunity for him is crazy for his price point. See, so far this season, we've seen a 27, a 14, a 16, and a 17. Granted, you've seen 8.3, 1.2, and he kind of hovers around his current price point, 5,800. So, is a game where we could see him, have a lot of success in the pass game. Jacoby Myers at 5,600, just a really good matchup against Miami. So have to mention him. Also have to mention Jerry Jeudy. Just the Cleveland pass catchers with how much they're going to throw the ball. Have to mention that. Ricky Pearsall at 4,900. Kind of seeing his little run. 5 targets against Kansas City, 4 targets against Dallas, 6 targets against Tampa. Just kind of seems like, the opportunities are there for Ricky Pearsall as well. So 4,900, I don't think it's a bad play by any means. Demario Douglas, 4,700, yet again, I think is a really good tournament play for me. Just a reliable guy. Obviously, Boutte is a guy that a lot of people are targeting, but I do think Demario Douglas is their number 1 receiver as of right now. Elijah Moore down here at 4,300. Yet again, it's just Cleveland pass catchers. I mean, the targets, 7, 12, 9. We'll say 7. But the last 2 games where Jameis has started, 12 and 9 for Elijah Moore. So the targets are definitely there. And you get a big discount compared to Tillman and Jerry Jeudy. So both those guys. I will mention, kind of going down here at, I think Denver pass catchers, Vele, Troy Franklin are worth mentioning. Other than that, I don't have anybody down there that really screams tournament. Like, you can make a case for anybody, but those are kind of the guys I'm targeting there. For tight end, Travis Kelce at 6,300, being a big pass catcher in a big matchup. His numbers against Buffalo are amazing. So definitely think he's a cash play there for me. If George Kittle's in, I'm going to say George Kittle, but it is risky. But I am going to say George Kittle. But going down, Hunter Henry, 3,900 at home against the Rams. Rams have been really, really bad against tight ends so far this season. Kind of look at Hunter Henry's targets. I mean, he's seeing 4+ targets a game. Very, very favorable matchup here against the Rams at home, where, I mean, his home splits are definitely way better than the road splits. So Hunter Henry at his price point. And then we got some value. Dalton Kincaid is out. We get Dawson Knox at 3,500 against a team that is the worst against tight ends. The worst. Dawson Knox. This is not the same Dawson Knox we had years ago. Obviously, Dalton Kincaid's there. Dalton Kincaid still not putting up crazy numbers, but they kind of replaced Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis with Amari Cooper now and Keon Coleman. Shakir takes a huge step, so haven't had to go there as much to the tight end as they have before, and by that I mean Kincaid 1 year, Dawson Knox a couple years ago. So, and then Brock Wright, I am going to mention is there's another play that I'll talk about in just a second. But no Laporta, Brock Wright, favorable matchup, 3,300. I think has got to be mentioned for cash. But we're going to go down to 2,500, and we're going to find them. I should have just clicked on the Rams, but we're going to go down here. Davis Allen, 2,500. Last week, 6 targets in that game. Stoneman, so kind of, paying for a cheap defense. You could pay for 2 cheap defenses and double punt and, hope between Davis Allen and whatever defense you pick that's cheap. You're hoping for 10, 11 points, maybe 10, 11 points out of that. And it would definitely pay off, right? If you're paying a guy $5,000 and he gets you 11, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, it's not great, but it's not the end of the world and allows you to get other places. Now, for tournaments, Brock Bowers against Miami, his just target share is up there. If you consider him a wide receiver, his numbers are crazy. David Njoku, 5,500 against New Orleans. Really good matchup there. Kind of see his target since Jameis has taken over. 14, 7, 7, although the Cincinnati game is different, but still 7 targets in 2 games with or 7 targets in each game with Jameson Williams. First price point 5,700. Still a really good play there. Going down, I'm going to mention, although Cleveland plays tight ends pretty good, I will continue to mention Taysom Hill at his price point is just going to see volume. He is going to see volume with the injuries the Saints have. So, although it's not great, it's not the greatest matchup, I will mention. Tucker Kraft, 4,400 against Bears. Got kind of worried that we were going to see Tucker Kraft stay at a more higher 4K range. Obviously, he has a really bad game against Arizona when his price skyrockets. But then, goes down to under 12 points against Houston, 16 points against Jacksonville, 7 against Detroit. Now he's even cheaper against a Bears defense that gives up, yards to tight ends. So, although there aren't a lot of mouths to feed in that Green Bay offense, I think it's a favorable matchup for him. Pat Freiermuth at 4,200 against Baltimore. Mentioned just how bad the Ravens secondary has been. But against tight ends, it's just as bad. Roquan Smith not doing what he usually has. But Pat Freiermuth really hasn't been involved a crazy amount this season. And his price is just too high, in my opinion, for his output he's had. Cole Kmet against Green Bay. Cole Kmet, I mean, the drop-off of Cole Kmet, right? Like, we saw week 2 against Houston, 5 targets, 27 yards, not much. Then week 3 against Indy, 11 targets, 10 receptions, 97 yards, and a touchdown. Kind of average games against, Carolina or the Rams. They get the pass game. DeAndre Swift going. They get Jacksonville. He goes off again. 2 touchdowns. Non-existent. 5 targets. 5 targets for Cole Kmet in the last 3 games. 5. You have a new offensive coordinator. Things can change, which is why he's nowhere near a cash play, but he's got to be worth mentioning in tournaments in a favorable matchup. Juwannu Smith, I like the run game for Miami. I like Tyreek Hill, but Juwannu Smith has yet again just been he gets involved in the offense. We haven't seen it in a Miami offense really in years. Juwannu Smith has kind of been the outlier. They acquired him for a reason. They've been using him. So at 3,800, he's definitely a play. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of kind of tournament plays for me. Yet again, I'll mention the Denver tight ends and Troutman, Kroll, but just no one really takes over that spot. So that's kind of it. I hate going over defenses. I'll just mention a couple. Tennessee's defense, 2,300. I'm just gonna mention them. Packers defense, 3,500. Lions defense, 3,800. Those are kind of the 3, right? Jacksonville team with no Tank Bigsby. Mac Jones is a quarterback. Smith should be playing, as far as I know, for Detroit, so that'll be a boost. And then how bad the Bears offense, new offense coordinator, you gotta kind of target that in a big rivalry game of Green Bay and Chicago. So I'll mention those three. So hope you guys did enjoy. If you guys want all my player pools, my cash, my tournament, and then just some outlier value plays, as well as like bets, props, and any DFS or fantasy questions, head over to our website. It's a very cheap subscription package that we offer you guys, and it's not only DraftKings, it's FanDuel as well. So if you guys are interested in that, the link for that will be in the description. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will be live Sunday morning. I will not have a video going out tomorrow on Saturday, so it's just today and then the live stream Sunday. So if you guys are interested in that, check that one out, and I'll see you guys in the next one.